spun us around in a circle. And also, Will plans to come out and shoot a t-shirt into the audience, so keep an eye out for that. Watch it right here. It's almost a point vortex, hit the front side of the denominator, and then chaos ensues. And we're facing in a different direction as well. We're facing out to the north, and that tornado actually spun us about 100 degrees. But the suction vortex was spinning so rapidly that it felt like we went around a couple of different times. So I thought we were airborne for a split second. The windows were down, and then suddenly we're pointing off to the north. We did about a 100-degree turn, and we actually launched the air cannon. We launched a miniaturized sensor into that tornado. We saw the parachute pop. And then the sensor shot straight up into the tornado, and we never found it again. But we had live streaming data that was streaming at 1 time a second. That was streaming down to Will with the receiver. And we still are looking for that sensor. It's somewhere to the west of Huntsville, Alabama. But if we can recover that, then we'll have the full data set, the 10 times a second data inside of that tornado. But the anemometer on the back side of the denominator measured 135 mile per hour northerly wind, and that vortex is moving at about 60 miles an hour, spinning counterclockwise. So you have to add the forward speed of that suction vortex to the right side of it. So we have about a 240 mile per hour wind just in front of the denominator, 135 mile per hour northerly on the back side, and that's what causes it to spin like a pancake inside of that tornado. But I should have deployed the spike system. I was trying to line up that tornado, and I was going to track it all the way to the intersection, drop the spikes to the ground, and we would have been totally fine. And I thought it was a weaker tornado that we could handle with our windows down and without the spike system. But then it fired up that suction vortex, and the computer simulation showed that the winds inside those suction vortices could be 2 to 4 times that of the main tornado. So the main tornado has winds of about 120 miles an hour, and those suction vortices could even approach 400 to 500 miles per hour on really small scales, and even get close to the speed of sound. But as you know, June was crazy this year in 2025. We call it June Sandy. We saw all kinds of strobe lightning like this, a ton of tornadoes up in the Dakotas and Minnesota, and it was a very active season in 2025 with incredible persistence from February all the way up to the fall season. And really the last 3 years have been crazy for tornadoes. I think about 3 years ago, we had a shift in the 10-year cycles that happened in North America, and I think we have another 5 to 7 years more of these crazy tornado seasons in the United States. So it's these suction vortices that we're really trying to understand. That's why we built the denominators, denominator 1, 2, and 3. We've got the most recent denominator 3 out there, and we're also working on a denominator 5. The denominator 4 is actually my Subaru, and we blew all the windows out in that just last week. I'll show you that video. This is up in Greenfield, Iowa. This was last year, and this could be one of the strongest tornadoes in history because of the suction vortices within it. And you can see some of those little pointed vortices that are going all the way down to the ground. Those are probably only about 10 to 50 feet wide, those real skinny with gel-like vortices. And this tornado was rated a high-end EF4. But those vortices could be 2 to 4 times the wind in the main tornado. So we might even have 400 to 500 mile per hour winds in this. And you can see some condensation, rooster tails getting pulled off the buildings there. That is as an insulation, dirt and everything from those structures is causing big time condensation. Even a little bit of wave and the rear flame downdraft with the RFD that wraps around the south side of a fast moving tornado like this. And you can see all the complex structure of this tornado. I launched my drone at this tornado. I was moving at 60 miles per hour toward us, and the drone ended up orbiting the tornado. We lost the drone and went back and found it a day later to get all of this footage here. But this is a classic multiple vortex tornado, and what causes that is the interaction of the tornado with the friction of the earth. So this thing is just cooking at 60 miles an hour. You can see a lot of hills out there, a lot of trees as well, and that causes the tornado to split into those individual suction vortices that you see there. And all that is low pressure. That is a pipe of low pressure that we call a dynamic pipe. That's all a tornado is, with a lot of cloud matter. That white coloration there, that's just fog basically rotating very violently. You can see a lot of debris in there as well, that multiple vortex tornado. But this is why we built the Dominators. I storm chased a beater vehicle for many years in 1985 Plymouth Reliant, and we got so close to these tornadoes and saw these suction vortices up close and personal that we knew we needed a little bit more protection. This one's from 2007. This was back with my late business partner Joel Taylor. And this is one of the first times that we saw those suction vortices in such an intense compact tornado. You can see a king just above the ground as it's interacting with the friction of the earth. But it's just one vortex right now, and then as it starts to interact, that rough terrain will split up into individual suction vortices. That's the last time Joel let me drive. Now you can crank the audio on this video, and you can really hear the roar of this tornado. As it starts splitting into suction vortices. Watch this tree that is about to hit. We're sitting here around the tornado, rapid upward motion in the tornado itself, rapid rotation force. Oh no, there's structures, no! This is a barn, but you can see those suction forces whipping around in there. Watch this tree. It'll get flattened first by the downdraft and then rip out the ground. So that's important because we have a sheet of sitting air around the tornado. And that's why we have the rockets and air cannons, so that we can launch the rockets and get through that sheet of sitting air. And that's when you know you always have Dominators to be out there. Sometimes it's super to get incapacitated. And this is the rental car that we chased the line with. And we didn't do too much damage on the Greenfield day, but then on the Eldorado, Oklahoma changed just a couple of days after that. We had a cedar tree come through the front right of the window, and then I ended up taking it down here to West Texas. And you know what happens down here during hail season? I ended up lighting up this rental car from front to back, and I'm actually on the do not rent list of all major rental car companies. And I think I've damaged maybe over 100 rental cars, not on purpose. I worked with AccuWeather for many years. But you have to get through the hail to get to the south side of the storm to see the tornado very often. And this is what a guerrilla hail core looks like. When you see that big milky white sky like that, that means that you're about to get hit by some major ice grenades. And everything you see in these videos is really how not to stay safe around severe weather. You're doing kind of a big hill like this, you want to pull the vehicle off the side of the road and just ride it out. But this was up in eastern Wyoming in 2018, and I was in a Nissan Sentra rental car on this area west of Deadwood. And anytime you see those vehicles coming the other direction with their emergency lights on, flashing, you know you're about to get into some serious action. And some of the biggest hail I've ever seen was in eastern Wyoming. And also down here in West Texas. And if you see this, pull the vehicle off the side of the road, save the rental car. That's most important. And then here's the one in West Texas for that rental car that I just showed you. And anytime you see that little ribbon of dirt on the horizon, a lot of times that means you're about to get some wind-driven baseball and softball size hail. And this is what caused the snowball of rental car lawsuits hail course. But this is not on purpose. Just trying to get to the other side of it. Everybody here knows how this feels in Abilene. This is my Subaru, and every square inch has a hail dent on it. I actually got that hood with a new Subaru in 2018, and I ended up losing that vehicle to the storm surge of Hurricane Ian, so I towed the vehicle out just to get the hood, and then I keep mounting on these refurbished Subarus. I paid $1,000, I'm going to put the hood on there, and then we do this to it. Well, when the updraft is rotating, it's a lot stronger as well, so it's able to support those really large hailstones. And I've even seen a 7-inch diameter hailstone once. It's the biggest hail I've ever seen in Piedmont, Oklahoma. And you know you storm chase hard when you have to tow the vehicle home. So we had to tow the vehicle back from Laverne, Oklahoma. We did see a tornado on this day as well. A lot of greenish. Anytime you see that green and blue coloration, it means that there's a lot of hail in there refracting the sunlight coming in. You can see the inflow wind coming in, the tornado would be buried back in the rain. Watching the news circulation in front of me, though, you always have to look for that differential motion of the lower cloud elements. That's a giant metal cyclone or a rotating updraft. And this is probably one of the biggest hailstorms I've ever chased. We were digging shards of glass under our skin. I put the visor down, of course, put on my gas station sunglasses, and it came in the window. And we were probably 1 or 2 hailstorms away from having some big problems in there. But still, I enjoy being in the hail course, of course. And I've seen a lot of crazy things over the years. I've been storm chasing for almost 30 years now, ever since I got my driver's license. That's the key to storm chasing. Basically just that in a bigger vehicle, it's all you need. But I have seen flying cows, believe it or not. So this is up in eastern Wyoming. This was the same year as that Nissan Sentra video that I just showed you. But just like the original movie Twister, I have seen cows flying through the air. And you have to assume with the updrafts in the tornado that the cow was probably set down gently. There it is. And they were missing by the ranchers on it. Call that ground. And the cow didn't have the updrafts inside the tornado, so you have to assume that the cow was okay.
It's possible to blame him gently.
But on this day, I also
We know
had a
it didn't.
rental car. And I was about 12 miles away from that tornado when it first touched down. I was in a small rental car sedan, and I was on a complex canyon road, and I ended up popping the tire on it. And I had 2 options. I could either change the tire and miss the tornado, or I could drive on the rim for 12 miles. That's exactly what I did. I drove on the rim, got right up next to this tornado, and then it started retrograding back toward me. Softball-sized hail was wrapping around, and I blew all the windows out of the rental. Then I saw the cows flying in the air, and I came up to Federal, Wyoming, and I saw a destroyed home, and the rancher was emerging from the home. He had taken shelter underneath the stairwell there, and he had 2 Siberian Huskies with him. I said, "You can take shelter in my rental car." And they got in the back seat, and the dogs just shredded the interior of the car, up and down, and they put the donut tire on, and I ended up returning that one at Denver International Airport. And all the employees were at half noon, and they were giving me a round of applause. But I think AI has taken over the rental car business, and I might be identified now as a high-risk customer. I tried to use the name Teen River a few times. That didn't chased the widest tornado in history and the second widest in history. This is the Abilene, Oklahoma tornado in 2013, which was a really active season for about 2 to 3 weeks in the middle of the later portion of May. And this one was also a multiple vortex tornado. It actually touched down as a multiple vortex. And this parent tornado was so large at 2.6 miles wide that the individual suction forces in this tornado reached up to over a quarter mile wide at times. A lot of times they're developing on the south side of the really large circulation. The second widest tornado in history was the Abilene, Nebraska tornado, May 22nd, 2004, 2.2 miles wide. And this one also did a left-hand turn. A lot of times in the chasing tornadoes in the Great Plains, as they mature, they like to do a left-hand turn. So if you're north of the tornado, you want to look at that left edge, and as it's continuing to advance, once it stops, that means the tornado is likely starting to move off to the north and starting to deviate motion that you have to watch out for. But all that is condensation, and you have a pool of low pressure that's hovering above the ground. That's a dynamic pipe. In this case, it's like 2 miles wide. And then underneath, as it's interacting with the earth, you see those suction forces form. We had the Dominator 1 and the Dominator 2 chasing the tornado, and just as the tornado was broadening out and starting its left-hand turn, we ran into a power line, and the power line got wrapped around the front light bar of the Dominator, sparks flying everywhere, and we couldn't free ourselves from the power line, so we put the car in reverse and kind of backing up, and it got tighter and tighter, and then it shot blew up like a frisbee in the tornado, and we never popped it. So we fixed the rest of the chase with an open engine, and fixed our overheating problem. This is a big tornado. I was working for Channel 4 of the news company in Oklahoma City, and helicopters around these storms. Every news station has their own chase vehicles, just like down here. And so we were recording this tornado as it was ongoing. Mike Morgan said it was day 399 all over again. Look at the upward motion into that dynamic pipe. That's because you have low pressure hovering just above the ground, and the vertical pressure gradient excites those vortices that they form. Also saw soft balls that were wrapping around the circulation. That was a big tornado. They're all shapes and scales and sizes. I also did some flash flood chasing. This is when I was working for AccuWeather. Running along the edge. Do not attempt this either. But this is out in southern Utah. I like to get the front walls of these flash floods. This is kind of a relaxing activity because they have a rain for them to come down and we can smell the floods. A lot of times they come off wildfire burn scars. And we were down in the Texas Hill Country with those recent devastating floods that happened. We helped out afterward with the United Kingdom Navy and Team Dominator Search and Rescue. But the floods that came down there in the Texas Hill Country were about 100 feet tall, the debris flow in front of those. You can rapid vibe over this one. A lot of people say this is what happens every Taco Bell. Up there. But this is called the wildfire burn scar. You can see how dark it is. That one came out of the Pine Gulch, fire burn scar. Giant tire, that's the wildfire fighting equipment that comes down. And those that come off wildfire burn scars really come down quite quickly. And Tim Samaras is a pioneer of storm chasing science and engineering. He largely inspired most of the research that we do in our science mission at Team Dominator. Very sadly, he and his team, Twistex team, lost their lives in that widest tornado in history, the Abilene, Oklahoma tornado. And he was trying to deploy his turtle probes in the path of that tornado. And this is an incredible innovation, one of many innovations from Tim Samaras. And he would drop those in the path of the tornado to measure the pressure fall and also infer the wind over it. It's based on differential pressure and the known shape of the turtle probe. But this inspired us to use ground-based probes and also eventually to develop the Dominator, which is basically a mobile version of the ground-based probe. And we had Tim's instruments mounted on top of the Dominator, pitot tube end monitors. He was a great mentor and friend of mine for our science mission and for all storm chasers that are out there doing science. And I first met her. My late storm chasing partner. She's a Yorkshire Terrier. She lives to be 17 years old. Sadly, she just passed away about a month ago. But Gizmo saw over 250 tornadoes. She also saw a Category 5 hurricane. Lots of hurricanes, nor'easters. She had a lot of friends in the storm chasing community as well. But this is a big intercept that Gizmo and I had in 2019. You can see her little pin cast that she had on. Actually broke her paw a little bit before this. She was getting in a fight with the German Shepherd. The German Shepherd ended up becoming her friend after that, so it actually wasn't a fight about it. But she did have to have that pin cast on the whole season. And we actually got separated from the Dominator 3 during that tornado intercept. And it ended up hitting a freshly plowed field, and just suddenly a debris cloud appeared out of nowhere, and I couldn't get back to the Dominator. So I had no choice but to keep Gizmo in my bread basket, and pointed my back into the wind. I felt the corn stalks and debris hitting it, and then the tornado moved off to the east. But that tornado actually gave me pink eye for about 3 months after that. So that was when we realized that tornadoes are toxic, especially the dustbuster tornadoes, but any tornado can be toxic because they can pick up bacteria and fungus and other things from the ground. And the Joplin, Missouri tornado in 2011, the EF5 actually had flesh-eating bacteria inside the tornado. So one of the things we're going to be doing for our science mission next year is measuring the air quality inside the tornadoes. Here you can see Gizmo with her friend Connor in front of one of 250 tornadoes. I'm not sure if she actually knew the tornado was on the ground. She was just happy to be there. Montana. This is when I came back after a hurricane to pick her up.
Oh.
Got like 6 slides of Gizmo over here. She was an amazing storm chasing dog. Saw all 48 states, Canadian provinces. And as I mentioned, we didn't always have a Dominator. My first ever storm chasing vehicle was a 1985 Plymouth Reliant, and that's probably the most robust of all the vehicles. You could pound into hail with that, wouldn't even do a dent. And then I had the 1991 Chevy Lumina up there in the upper right. I held that vehicle together with duct tape, and I actually got 35,000 miles without changing the oil. I ended up leaving on the side of the road, using the Kansas Oklahoma border, and I had the driver on the front. Every time we take that car through a small town, we get pulled over and have about a 2-hour search of the vehicle. Chasing that one. And then we built the Dominators. That was from our time at Discovery Channel Storm Chasers. Dominator 1 is in the right, Dominator 3 in the middle, Dominator 2 on the left. And Dominator 2 and 3 have a spike system that can anchor us down to the ground, but the Dominator 1 actually never had spikes. And the whole goal of the Dominator is to drop the shell flush to the ground, prevent the wind from getting underneath, and that'll keep it anchored out, down to the ground because of the way that those panels are shaped. It should always have a downward force directed on it, unless you're in a big side wind. And I started off as a science nerd. I still am, of course. I didn't go through puberty until about age 25, so I didn't get like insect collecting, play the oboe, Boy Scouts. And I collected insects for like 15 years, specializing in moths, butterflies, scarab beetles, of course. This is my whole collection. When I retired from insect collecting, I caught an Eastern Hercules beetle and realized that my true passion was always storm chasing, the science and meteorology. I did science Olympiad in school, of course. My mom and I still do look for caterpillars out there. But it's really my mom that inspired me to get into science. And she was a middle school science teacher. Got me started with insect collecting and storm chasing. But she was against storm chasing at first. I had to sneak out to storm chasing. I grew up in Michigan in the 85 Reliant. And then I moved to the University of Oklahoma to study meteorology and storm chase. And I did get a chance to take my mom on the chase. I had to against her will, but it was in 2015 when I finally graduated from the University of Oklahoma. I was there for 17 years, continuously enrolled, 1998 to 2015. And she made out for graduation and she landed in Oklahoma City. And I said, "We're going storm chasing." And she's like, "No, we're not. Take me to the hotel." And I told her, "Don't worry, we won't see one. It doesn't look like a big setup." And we ended fast storm chase. And it was a multiple vortex. But the tornado actually ended up changing its path and moving a little bit left as the often really great planes. But if I was in the Dominator, I would have been about a quarter mile up the road waiting for it, shooting rockets from the tornado, air cannons as well. And then the parachute pops and the sensors get pulled up through the tornado, and the GPS data measures wind speed and direction, thermodynamics inside of the funnel, and the goal is to get a real-time intensity estimate. But back then, we were just in that soft top tier track trying to learn the structure of the tornado. And then we saw the damage right after this, the dark side of the tornado was leaving behind. We saw horses that were meandering in the middle of the highway, and people emerging from their homes with everything leveled. The smell of natural gas up there. And that was our first time being in the damage and doing search and rescue afterward. But also, probably still to this day, one of the strongest tornadoes I've ever seen. And then we storm chased for many years, and then the Discovery Channel called in 2007, and we were licensing footage to them. They would put Sean Casey's voice over it for a few years, and then they asked us if we wanted to be a part of the show, and that made it possible for us to build the Dominators and fund our science mission. We did a lot of promo shoots like this. Of course, we'd be inside the Dominator if we were intercepting a tornado. You'd see Chris and Joel seeking shelter behind me there. I think they had a high-powered fan that they were blasting on some of these shots. And two tornado vehicles, the Tig and the Dominators. Tig was the kind of bad guys in the show. Round-based roads, all sacrifices, fans. That was when I realized I was a spaz for the first time. But this is 2009 when we had our first interceptors of the Dominator. We had the window blow out of that. We had protective windows that we would manually lift up to put in place. And we also saved the Bud Light truck. We did a Bud Light commercial during our time at Discovery Storm Chasers. That's the Dominator one there. behind the 747 jet, and we actually ended up testing the dominator one after the fact, but we intercepted a bunch of tornadoes to begin with. We should have followed the scientific method, test the vehicle first, see what kind of winds it can handle, and then intercept the tornadoes. But the dominator one was built by a mechanic at the golf course that I worked at up in Michigan. Kevin Barton, and he built race cars for the dirt tracks in Michigan, so he's the only guy we do with the skills to build the Dominator. And he built the Dominator 1, and I picked it up in May that year, our first season on Storm Chasers, and then we drove right into our first tornado here in Kirksville, Missouri, and it worked. Thankfully. Now you can see that we needed a spike system when we tested it. It was a Mythbuster show with 300 mile-per-hour winds. It ended up sliding across the ground. You can see the tip on the other side. They were flying with their harpoons in the ground. You can see chunks of ice that get lost as the engines ramped up. You can see it starts to wobble, and it was feeling the downward force because of the angled shell on the outside. So it worked in theory, but then it started to slide across the ground. So that motivated the addition of the spike system on Dominator 2 and 3. So we have hydraulic powered spikes that go in at an angle, and that keeps us anchored to the ground and prevents a spin, or even worse, a roll or a tumble would be terrible with that later. And then Storm Chasers was canceled in 2011, so we did our own series called Tornado Chasers. Pilot tornado. Let's intercept. Let's go forward. It's moving southeast. Moving southeast. That was the Abilene tornado.
Today is for all of us. It's all about saving people's lives that are on that here.
Chasing Oklahoma is the most violent of the violent, and that's why Reed is here.
I'm Channel 4. I'm new member 412.
You're all going to lay watch until 10 p.m. tonight.
What's the vertical length of this tornado or something? A lot of vertical winds in there as well. So this tornado happened in Andover, Kansas in 2022, also a drone shot. And you can see the dynamic pipe rotating above it. That's condensed air, that's the low pressure. And as that drills close to the ground, it excites those jet-like vortices underneath, pure vertical winds that are happening. This is also captured by a drone, and I was in a rental car. I ended up leaving the drone in the air and then driving after the rental car, and I had to recall the drone the next day to get the footage. But we were live streaming on Facebook, and the firefighter in Andover was watching the live stream. There wasn't yet a tornado warning issue because the storm was so close to radar, and he pulled the sirens, and nobody lost their lives in the town of Andover from this one. But you can see that jet-like vortex just streaming right up to the dynamic pipe. That's a helical vortex breakdown. Basically, as the bubble of low pressure is getting closer to the ground, it causes the jet-like vortex to wrap around it. But the dynamic pipe was getting closer to the ground and lifting up and kind of bouncing up and down a little bit, and then it fully planted just off the north. but it's basically just a pipe of low pressure, and as it drills down, just like a drill, and it gets within the ground, that's when it excites those vertical suction vortices. And a tornado usually happens underneath the rotating updraft. When an updraft starts to rotate, we call it a mesocyclone, and once it gets that rotation, it gets a stronger updraft, and it's capable of supporting baseball and softball size hail up in the updraft, and even tightening up into a tornado if the low-level wind shear is oriented perfectly to the storm motion. You get a lot of horizontally rotating tubes that are invisible in the atmosphere when you get wind shear, and if the storm motion is parallel to those tubes, it can more effectively tilt them into the vertical, and you get a tornado. And you also get a lot of strong winds, westerly strong winds that wrap around the backside of the tornado. That's called the RFD. And we're doing what's called a hook slice maneuver, where you go from back to front through the rain and hail that's wrapping around the mesocyclone. You're just trying to penetrate the backside of the storm, and then you can get a clear view of the tornado right out to your south. And if you're launching rockets in the tornado or parachute drones, you want to give it an inflow notch. Remember, all of that wind is flowing in toward the tornado. A lot of vertical motion with tornadoes. Sometimes there's one vortex, but when they start to interact with the friction of the earth, that's when they can split into multiple vortex tornadoes, and that can happen at any time. It's really difficult to predict that. You also get a sheet of sinking air along the outside of the tornado. That's called the rear flank downdraft, and it will come into the mesocyclone, wrap around the tornado, and basically trap inflow air within a smaller vortex. That's a tornado. And they often have different shapes and sizes. Usually they'll start off an elevated bowl with a ground circulation. They'll turn into a cone or a wedge tornado when they reach maturity. And then when that sinking air cuts them off from the mesocyclone, that's when they roll out. And it'll start to be a roll-like tornado. So sometimes it can still even be more intense than a larger, more mature tornado because you make the flow a lot more compact. Here's an example of a multiple vortex tornado as well. This is in Pipestone, Manitoba. This is a big time tornado in 2007. These are all the same tornado. You can see it in the form as a cone first. A lot of vertical motion in that, low swirl ratio tornado. And then when it fully plants, you get a combination of vertical and sinking motion in the middle of the tornado. And then you'll get an eye-like feature in the middle of the tornado. We intercepted one in Spalding, Nebraska in 2023 that had an eye in the middle, and that was associated with a 100 millibar pressure drop that can give you concussion-like symptoms inside the tornado when you intercept it. And the scale that we use to measure tornado's intensity is the Fujita scale, which is now the enhanced Fujita scale, and it's purely a damage-based scale. So after the tornado moves through, engineers and meteorologists will go in, look at the damage, and assess the quality of the engineering. And if you have a mobile home that's hit by an EF2, it'll be totally destroyed, but it'll also be totally destroyed by an EF5. So it's impossible to tell if you have all mobile homes to get an EF5 rating, because the EF2 will still cause total destruction. And we actually haven't had an EF5 officially since 2013 now. So it's about 12 years. But I think I've seen a lot of EF5s, including this year, probably multiple, where they just didn't hit high enough quality engineering to justify an EF5 rating. Tornadoes do happen here more frequently than anywhere in the world, stronger, more persistent, big outbreaks, and that's because we have the Gulf of Mexico to the south, we have the sloping terrain of the Great Plains up to the Rocky Mountains, and it's a very unique area geographically across the world. But you do get tornadoes up in Argentina as well, like the Pampas of Argentina. But the seasons are a little bit flip-flopped. It's about to be their spring down there, and the tornado is on the north side of the storm instead of the south side. And you want to chase the left split instead of the right moving supercell. But they do get some big tornadoes out of eastern Asia as well, with that sloping terrain from the moisture source that are the oceans. And there are a lot of big tornadoes in South Africa as well, a lot of strong ones. I have chased out in Argentina back in 2009 and 10. We saw a tornado down there in the south of Cordova. This is an AI forecasting product called the NATOcast that we use. We're starting to use a lot more of these AI supplemented forecast model tools. I just use them in concert with the outlooks in my own forecasting, and sometimes we look at trends in the AI forecasting. But most of my forecasting is based on the shape of the upper level trough. hurricanes. I'm not as much of a fan of chasing hurricanes anymore just because it's such a large, sprawling system, basically a mesoscale convection system. And the key to chasing a hurricane is to get right out the coastline with that wind and the eye wall coming right out the frictionless ocean. That's how you experience the strongest winds that a hurricane has. The problem with that is you also get a tsunami-like wall of water that's called a storm surge that'll come in. So if you're trying to get those strongest winds right down the coast, you're usually going to lose your vehicle. That's what happened to Denominator 4 during Hurricane Ian. And Hurricane Katrina also lost their vehicle to that one. And it's because of the storm surge that comes in with that flow that's directed onshore. Hurricanes also have a lot of tornadoes that within their outer bands and within the eye wall. And here is that storm surge with Hurricane Ian and lost to Denominator 4. And it ended up getting 10 or 12 feet tall. I happened to find a still home when I was live streaming. Everybody thought I broke into that still home for safety purposes, but I had people. We had like 170 mile-an-hour winds with this hurricane, and ended up getting in the middle portion of the eye of the hurricane where you can see the stadium effect. But hurricanes are such a large system that you can't really comprehend the curvature of the flow when you're on the ground. Unless you're in the eye, you can see that stadium effect up there. You see the raw eye wall, the near category 5 hurricane. You have a loss of visibility, really heavy rain that happens, little tornado like what you see going on, and you're basically getting engulfed here into the ocean. And the same thing happened with Hurricane Katrina back in 2005 when we were chasing that. But we ended up in a high-speed chase with a rusty dump truck, and we thought it was a criminal that was trying to steal our cameras and everything, and out of our Honda Accord, but it ended up being the chief of police in Slidell, Louisiana. So they put us in jail for most of Hurricane Katrina, but they made a mistake. They thought we were looters. And the rusty dump truck came back, and by the time they let us out of the jail cell, the flood waters were so high and our vehicle was floating away. There were floating clumps of fire ants on top of the flood. And we ended up having to get a ride by a fishing boat, and then we hitchhiked out of the damage zone of Hurricane Katrina for 2 days before we could finally rent a car and get back. But usually when you chase hurricanes, it ends up being like a crazy survival situation like that rather than a storm chase. Most of our science is focused around tornadoes, and this is actually an image that I made by Microsoft Paint. You can see I made some multiple vortices there. Little tanks just above the ground too as they're interacting with the friction of the earth. But the goal of our science mission is to intercept the tornado at the base with the Dominator. Just drive right into it, actually get the path of the tornado, drop the armor, flush to the ground, and let the tornado move over us so we can run to the surface and get inside. And at the same time, we're shooting rockets into the tornado, a parachute will pop, and that way the wind is doing all the work with the parachute and the miniaturized sensor. So the GPS data ends up being equivalent to the wind speed. And we're also dropping an array of these long dart probes. Will's A25 just invented these, the long dart probes. And the goal is to have all these sensors flowing around inside the tornado at the same time. While we're live streaming, this data will be coming in, fed to an AI computer, and it'll be able to generate a real-time tornado intensity estimate. We had a tornado just to the north of here near Weatherford, Texas, and we launched a sensor into it, and the sensor was moving at speeds of 250 miles an hour above the ground, and that was just an EF2 tornado. So I think most tornadoes are capable of EF5 winds. And as I mentioned, we need the rockets because we need to get through the sheet of thin air that surrounds the tornado. Okay, so now the rockets are flying toward the tornado. It's punching through the pocket of thin air around the vortex. And once inside, the nozzle pops off and the parachute deploys, and it's carried around inside the vortex, just like the movie Twister. And we kind of that's the rocket. So as the probe is getting carried around inside the tornado, we're immediately getting live data like this. We've got pressure, relative humidity, we've got high angular acceleration, we've got our GPS position. And we even have the data exactly how the sensor is hovering around in 3D. But right now, we're only getting live data at 1 time per second. But we actually have to recover the physical sensor to get the super high resolution data. Up to the Lawrence Cylindro, we have 4 tornadoes. The tornado carried them 26 miles away from where we launched it. Mark, how did you run into the tornado right now? I believe so. How many twisters based on
bring it up with me, guys.
Now, yellow. There it is. Here's the lawn dart pros. We're going to use FPV drones to drop it to the ground. Obvious safety concern with this if there are humans or cows on the ground or any animals. You have to make sure that the ground is clear. But we'll fly these right in the back of the tornado and drop those spears in the ground into an array. And they have those little holes in the top so they can measure the pressure and wind speed of the ground. We really want that ground out data. And that's why the air cannons are such a good idea, because we could be inside the tornado and then launch, just like that one on May 20th this year. The Dominator 1 started off as a Chevy Tahoe, and that's the first vehicle that I ever got using a bank loan, and then I instantly turned it into the red shoe. Never told them about it, of course, or the insurance company. And one of our first tornado intercepts was on June 17, 2009, right after we got the Dominator. We intercepted the tornado, and the worst case scenario happened, where the tornado intensified with us inside of it. And at the same time, we were flying a drone just outside of the tornado with about a 15-foot wingspan, and that drone would carry parachute probes in the base of it, and the goal was to drop those parachute probes in the inflow region of the tornado while we're trying to intercept it at the same time. The FAA ended up shutting down our Air Force. I got threatened with $1 million fine right after this aired on Discovery Channel. But you can see the tornado ready to touch down up there. We're at the base of it, intercepting it down there, one about 10 the window blow out. And this is before you just purchased Mavic drones. This is the first time a drone was used for this purpose. And you can see it riding the inflow all the way back to the tornado. But we learned a very important thing on this thing, that the sitting air around the tornado will just deflect these parachute probes right into the ground. And you need the rockets to get inside of that sheet of sitting air, and the parachute will deploy and ride the vortex all the way up. But we were right underneath that developing tornado this time, the Dominator 1. That's what it looks like when you're looking straight up at the developing tornado. You can see the clear side as you go around that nipple funnel, and then it just drills all the way down to the ground. Here you have ground circulation before it's fully condensed. See the production crew getting out of there? It was always a challenge working with the production crew at first, because we actually didn't even have the paperwork in place, the insurance to intercept tornadoes, so they tried to not allow us to intercept, but we would do it anyway. Only Chuck Casey had the paperwork. But this one had a suction vortex coming around the back side of it. It was a weak tornado overall, intensifying, and then we were impacted by the suction vortex. We have a roof-mounted camera, and this will show you the pressure wave coming across the ground ahead of that suction vortex.
We're inside right now, look at this.
138.8 mile winds, up from 70 in a split second. And that was the sound of the window roll out. We used to have manual Lexington windows that we could manually lift up and latch. I didn't have time to get those up, so I just rolled the regular window up. A little bit of ketchup on the face. And then you can see it really intensified. And that's actually Tim Samaras to the left of the tornado. I ran onto him, and he actually gave me a band-aid up there, and then went east of the tornado and deployed the turtle probe. I happened to see the tornado this west of Aurora, Nebraska in 2009. But the key thing we learned on this day was that the parachute probes wouldn't make it all the way to the tornado. We need that propulsion of the rocket launch and the air cannons provide. But we did measure near EF3 winds in that suction vortex. The blue line shows it only had like 50 or 60 mile-an-hour winds, and then when that suction vortex came around the back side of it, ramped it up to 138.8, and that was basically EF3 intensity, about 2 to 4 times that of the main tornado. So it's possible the winds could even approach the speed of sound in those really strong tornadoes in the multiple vortex. So the Dominator 3, we built the spike system mounted in there. It's also based on a diesel Ford F-350 vehicle. We have a turbo and a fuel injector in there, so it could go 110 miles an hour, but we only go the speed limit, of course, for safety purposes. But it also has 16 gauge steel on the outside, Linex bed liner sprayed on the outside. We shot it at a 2x4 once we left Discovery Channel, we just put high-powered rocket engines in there. And you have to be careful when you're launching a rocket around a tornado because lightning likes to strike on the smoke paths of the engines. So that's why I have to launch the rocket from inside and down every 3 with the big red button.
As we turn north to get in the path.
This is the hydraulic side failure last year. This also did a left-hand turn at the last second. Nobody ever puts on the safety harnesses. This is 2024. Your Custer City located to the inflow feeding in the field. It's how you know you're in the path of this tornado every time you get that easterly inflow. We have the backup plan. The hydraulics failed, we buried the car in the ditch. That decreases its relative height compared to the ground we're on it. Watch the left edge here. See it first in the rain. Windows still down though. I'm blowing up the windows up because I can hear everything and you can see guys get all the smells. There's the left edge. It's going to get that smooth, crisp left edge of the tornado. You know it's really strong. Rapid rain. And I thought this is the worst case scenario where the tornado would include or roll out right on top of us. So we put the car in the ditch here. Our car is getting out of the ditch. And your chase. There's the left edge. But it did end up roping out basically just to the west of the road. We probably had 110-mile-per-hour winds there, and then we missed the tornado after that because it had to get towed out of the ditch. But now we have the one button pressed down, and then everything deploys. The spikes go in, the windows go up, and we have a backup manual just in case the hydraulics fail. So back in 2019 is the first time we actually got a rocket inside the tornado that we were able to track. And this is an EF4 tornado just south of Lawrence, Kansas. We launched about 3 miles to the south of Lawrence. It was a rain-wrapped tornado in 2019. You can see the inflow notch right into there. You can almost see the notch in the cloud. You can see the clear slot wrapping around it. It's really hard. It's still right. Clear slot is raining there as well. No countdown, I just hit the red button. And I actually saw the rocket going into the tornado. Parachute popped and they got pulled right into the vortex. Parachute popped at 400 feet above the ground. That's the receiver and Tupperware container. It's all a wide game coming in at one time a second. And the tornado just crossed the road to the south and it's visible to the east. That's Mark reading off the altitude sensor above the ground. And then we lost connection to it. We had the live streaming data to about 18,000 feet, and we thought we lost that sensor forever, so we posted a picture of the parachute on Facebook, and in 15 minutes somebody found it. And it fell down 30 miles away from where we launched it in a church, front yard of a church in Leavenworth, Kansas.
Wow.
Matt and Jeremy down there found it, so I flew out there, recovered the sensor, and then we got the whole entire data, 10 times the second data throughout the entire trajectory. That red is the rocket launch, and then the parachute popped about 400 feet above the ground and got pulled into the tornado, and it reached speeds of 190 miles an hour right over US Highway 59 there, which makes sense. We had 3 damage along the road there, and then EF4 damage. And it went around the tornado twice, then did a 130-mile-per-hour updraft into the mesocyclone, and then rode the rotating updraft to 30,000 feet before falling down to the left. The low little jet, I think, deflected it north like that. But we also measured 113.5 millibar pressure fall above ground inside that tornado, so that's our goal, is to get the three-dimensional X-ray of thermodynamics in the wind of the tornado. So for many years, I actually didn't have access to a Dominator. That's why I was in a Subaru and rental cars. And my good friend Sean Schofer, that had the Dominator since 2012, he went through a divorce, and there's a lot of times opportunity found in divorce, so I was saying to get a Dominator back. And that's why we've been intercepting tornadoes nonstop since 2023. And this is our first direct intercept in many years. And we were able to use the Dominator 3 for what it's intended to do. This is a world-class mover, too, which is different. Usually move west to east. This is on the north side and up below.
Protected in your own research vehicle, Dominator 3, the team prepares to drive into a tornado. Headed by team leader Reed Timmer, their goal is to use a subsonic sensor to measure the mysterious pressure drops inside.
That's what causes the concussion-like symptoms.
The vehicle's power and anchoring system will be put to the test, as will the drone pilot of Jordan Hall. But they need to time everything perfect. For Reed, it's a rare opportunity over 20 years in the making.
And go west and south to get to it.
And get it perfectly here.
The storm is one of the larger systems that looks like a hurricane. And this particular storm is highly
See that moving northwest?
moving east to west and down.
So this is the path of the tornado. The perfect deployment with spikes in the ground, hydraulics flush, and watch the cedar trees flow up to the air, and there was even a cow shepherded by the car. You'll see the front of the tornado, the northeast, it's trying to lift up the back of the Dominator. Here comes the couch. There it is. This is the front of the tornado, watch the eye in the middle of it stops. And then the back wall of the tornado comes through. But you can feel the Dominator bounce up and down the entire time. And the intense pressure drop that gives it a concussion. We drove around for 2 hours after this, trying to look for our
Did
monitor.
someone get inside the tornado? The first intercept by the woman